Let's talk about what happens after we die. This is the most scary, the most controversial topic that I bring up or that I get asked about as a professional psychic. And I've done so much extensive channeling on this in order to be able to fully understand, to the best of my ability, everything that goes on. I'm going to go through it in this video because I know, one, it adds a lot of comfort to a lot of people. If you're afraid about what happens after we die, I hope this video can help you. If you've had a lot of people die and you're so confused on how that works and you want them to be okay, I hope this video can help you. If you just have nervousness around like belief systems and like what if you're not aligned with the right one as far as the afterlife goes, I hope this video can help you because we will talk about the afterlife a little bit too. So I'm making this because of all of that. Also, I know right now a lot of people are scared just kind of in general with the state of everything, and I know I want to be like, well, just ignore it and bypass it. However, if it can help to understand a little bit more about how just this piece of us being incarnated is just a piece of a larger life journey we're going on, then I hope it does. However, to soften the intense energy, we're going to have like Hermes. This is Hermes the hamster. I'm going to fluff his little ears, make a little eyes come out there. There. He's going to sit and hang out. Okay? Nothing can be scary if you've got a fluffy little hamster Buddha sitting here. Of course, as always, took the notes in the Chaos Notebook. So what happens when we die? It's so funny because I think that this is the first kind of touch point that most people have with understanding psychic things or magic things in general. A lot of our modern organized religions are focused very much around what happens after this life, like how to live this life well to get to that afterlife space. And a lot of people get exposed to psychics or the idea of psychics either by trying to predict the future, will he call me back, that kind of thing, or by trying to figure out how their past loved ones are doing, what's happening after death, whether to like alleviate some stress for themselves or to understand things better. So this is like one of those things that everyone wants to talk about, and I get asked about this quite a lot. And I will say that my explanation of all this stuff is just based on my channeling, and I have channeled on this for literal years. I have to spend so much time tapping in and communicating with deities and astraling, my higher self and my mid selves, as well as talking to people's past loved ones and just asking them questions like, what are you doing now? How is the death process for you? Tell me about stuff. So I've studied this for literal years, and I have shared bits and pieces of it before. I even had a New York Post article actually written about my channeling with death. I was featured in Psychic News Now magazine about my channeling with death. So this is like an absolute specialty area that I'm really passionate about talking about. However, you may notice I don't actually talk about myself as a medium all that often. Can I talk to your past loved ones? Yes, I totally can. However, I don't advertise the service of being able to talk to your past loved ones for a multitude of different reasons. One, because it doesn't usually form a healthy growth environment when people come into a reading wanting solely to talk to past loved ones. I'm not saying that can't be a desire of yours. I'm not criticizing anyone who has done that. By all means, I've done that too. However, in my experience, if people come in wanting to just communicate with past loved ones and nothing else in a reading, it is a lot of quizzing the psychic. It is a lot of opening themselves up to unhealthy attachment. It is a lot of glorifying the people who have passed. So if you're wondering like, oh wow, like you've channeled this much on death, can I talk to my past loved ones through? Can you do mediumship? I can do that. I just don't advertise it as a service that I'm super passionate about because there's so much nuance with death that a lot of times the living don't want to accept or understand. So hopefully this video can help with that as well, as helping you accept and understand some of that nuance with death. And I want to start us off a little bit with a book recommendation. A lot of the things I'm going to be channeling, or a lot of the things I'm going to be sharing are really detailed fairly well in the journey that happens in Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. The premise is it's a tea shop you go after you die, and it's really, really cool. It gives you kind of a nice understanding of a little bit of what I'm going to be talking about in a fiction setting. Is it perfect? Not in the slightest. Is it really good though, as far as like a fiction book about understanding how this all kind of flows and works? Yeah, it's one I highly recommend. So again, if this is something you want to dive more into and you want to digest it more in a story form, that's what I recommend. Bunnies, could we not? I don't know if you can hear them, but they're like thumping around over here in the corner, trying to get my attention because they're like, you're sitting there too long. You've been sitting there ignoring us. I don't care. Now, the number one thing to remember throughout the entirety of this video is there are no rules. I will speak about this until I am literally blue in the face. There are no rules in spirituality, period. Us as humans, we really love to categorize things, put things in boxes, and put things into conceptual organization that makes us feel comfortable. And what happens with that is we take a lot of principles from organized religion that maybe we didn't ever even practice, but our grandmother did, or something like that, that have seeped into our lifestyle. And we like to apply those to everything that has to do with spirituality. People do this all the time. You can take 5 minutes scrolling through TikTok and find 7 different people on Spiritual Talk or Witch Talk being like, don't do this ever. This is a bad thing to do. Or if you're going to do this, you have to do this first, or whatever. Spirituality has no rules. It is an individualized, energetic journey through which you are experiencing the own arc of your soul. That's what spirituality is. I can provide guidelines, I can provide information, I can provide generalizations, I can provide things that I have channeled, but I cannot and will not ever sit here and give you 100% hard and fast rules. The only one, or the only thing that I say that is kind of close to rules, is try your best to not cause intentional and active harm to others. That is more of a human rule than it is a spirituality rule, but with spiritual stuff, obviously that comes into play quite a bit. So that will be only the rule I'd ever give you. However, when it comes to this whole world of channeling and talking to past loved ones and everything, I'm going to talk a lot about what I have seen is the most common experiences to happen as a person passes. Does this mean it happens with every single person in the exact same way? No, it does not. Does this mean that your morality affects the way that you pass? Unfortunately, no, it does not, and I will talk more about that in a little bit. Does this mean what I'm giving you right now mean exactly this is what's going to happen for sure, guaranteed to you as you pass? No, it does not. This is just most common stuff that I'm going to include in this video to help you better understand the soul journey as we pass and after we pass and how that kind of all works together. Just please keep in mind how many variations of different things there are out there and how much control and ability we have to drive our own lives. Because it's extensive. Like, we have way more control and way more influence than we give ourselves credit for when we're down here in a physical body. We truly do. So if there's some part of something I say and you're like, oh, I really don't want to do that, do not get hyper-focused on that thing and be like, this is going to happen to me when I die. Oh my gosh. It doesn't have to. Hi, Callum. There's no rules. He disappears behind my chair. That's my dog. Okay? No rules. So first I'm going to run through what I would consider the basic death journey. The basic journey that most souls go through for death. And then we're going to talk about some of the variations to that and how some things apply to it. Before I get to that basic death journey, though, I do have to do a special shout out to my top tier patrons who make it possible for me to do this channel and make these videos. If you want to get onto my Patreon, there's a ton of fantastic perks. You can go ahead and check those out through the link below. I will share it in the caption here. And while you're at it, you should hit a little subscribe. If you're new here, that would be fantastic. Thank you to Alex, Alexandria, Angela, Cheryl, Danny, Danielle, Caradwin, Linda, Marie, Marla, Meg, and Rhiannon. Thank you so much for being in my Patreon. I appreciate you. To all my patrons, you are all incredible. To my subscribers in any sense for this channel, for my email list, on other platforms, I adore you and I think you're super neat. Also, if you want to experience some travel with me, if you want to get to know your spiritual self better, if you want to connect with your higher self, please check out the Japan trip that I do have available below. We still have a couple spots available on that for this August. It's going to be so incredibly cool. Click the link and you can get all the information. If you want additional information about the Japan trip as well, please head over to my Instagram. There's a whole little highlight reel just for Japan trip stories, and that will give you better understanding of what exactly we'll be doing on this very unique and 100% life-changing experience. Cool. Let's talk basics of what happened when you die. When you die, this is just, again, the basic kind of journey. Let's say, and we're just going to go with someone who's dying of old age. This does apply for most death journeys in general, but we're just going to go with that for example. So let's say you pass away of old age. What will happen is once your soul leaves your body consciousness, because we are comprised of two consciousness, a soul consciousness and a body consciousness, your body consciousness returns to the earth. It goes down. It goes and reconnects with the earth because that's where it comes from. The earth gives our bodies the consciousness to be earthly beings. While we're here, it returns to the earth. Not when you like bury it, like from the moment of passing. From the moment of passing, body consciousness goes back to the earth. Soul consciousness leaves the body. Now, typically, those soul consciousnesses will hang around for a couple weeks, sometimes up to a month or two, and they tend to do the rounds, like go check in on the people they love the most, go to the spaces they loved the most, go back to their childhood homes, whatever. Everyone chooses to do their own thing when they're doing this. This is why we get a lot of stories, and maybe you've experienced this yourself, where we'll get a lot of stories of people being like, oh yeah, like that first 2 weeks after they passed, they came to, like, I felt them at the funeral, or they showed up in my dreams, or they were flickering my lights, or whatever, because they're very, very close tangibly. Our soul energies hang out around the people that we love or the spaces that we love for a little while before truly like passing on, before going to what we would consider the other side. So we hang out for a couple weeks, and then we do the transition. Then we go essentially up a like half layer of the universe cake. We're not going like up some layers of the universe cake. If you want to know more about the universe cake, I literally have a video about how the universe works, so please consult that. We're not going up a ton of layers and immediately rejoining with our higher self. That's not what's happening. We kind of cross over into the next realm, which is kind of crossing up into the next realm. And we enter into what I call a spiritual spa day. That's not the technical term, but it's a spiritual spa day. Essentially, we go and we cope with what it is to be human. And our guides are there, our past loved ones are there, all of those different, beings that might interact with us are there helping and supporting us as we go through this journey. And we kind of relive a lot of our life during the spiritual spa day. We kind of pick up all the pieces. We understand depth of ourselves. We understand things that maybe didn't get resolved that we're going to have to resolve in a different lifetime. We resolve some things we need to resolve for ourselves. There can be different beings that come in and interact with us here. We kind of also at the same time are getting a lot of downloads and remembering what it is to be a being in the universe. We're remembering some universal truths. We're remembering our power. We're remembering the rest of the soul journey we have laid out for us to go do. Because, as I already mentioned just slightly, us incarnated life is only a part of the soul journey that we're on for this particular arc of whatever we incarnated for. It's just a part. So the incarnated life is part, the dying part is part, and the healing from all of that is part, right? We're going through that whole sort of space. So after we pass and we're in that spiritual spa day, we're remembering what we kind of planned for ourselves, where we recall that, we get connected with that, and we really start thinking, working through that and understanding the next steps, etc. Then after a little while, we come out of the spiritual spa day. We've done a lot of healing, we've done a lot of coping, we've kind of reread some of our records. Either you go to your own Akashic records or...
Well, hello there. We interrupt your regularly scheduled program to help you understand. The Akashic records are a compendium of all universal events, thoughts, words, emotions, and intent ever to have occurred in the past, present, or future in terms of all entities and life forms, not just human. They are believed to be encoded in a non-physical plane of existence known as the mental plane. It is believed that the records are encoded vibrationally into the inherent fabric of space. Now back to your regularly scheduled program, but before you go, watch out for that pesky, feisty, mischievous little hamster man. He is trouble, just saying.
Or beings tell you, or you're just kind of given the remembering. It happens differently with everyone, honestly. And you remember a lot of yourself, etc. And then you kind of come back out of that space. Now, this is where we get people like, yeah, they were, my past loved one, I had no contact with them for a couple years. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they were in my dreams again, or I was smelling them around my house, or something like that. The spiritual spa day can last anywhere from a week or two, depending upon how fast the person is in our earth time, or a year to 7 years. I mean, it can go really long, depending upon that person's unique soul journey. So if you do have a past loved one and they died within the last year or two, and maybe you haven't felt very connected with them since they passed, that's probably what they're doing. They're probably getting their feet rubbed while they figure out some childhood trauma. Like that's most likely what they're doing in that sort of space. Once we come out of that space after that spiritual spa day, both as a spirit, both in our soul form, we start to do certain things. spirits will tell me, oh, I just, created a house for me over here, or I just went to the home I already had built for me, or I'm hanging out with my dogs, that kind of thing. We start to do stuff like that, or I went and met my favorite celebrity from when I was on Earth, because that was like the last part of my healing process. And we check back in with our loved ones down here, if we have them down here still, or if we feel aligned with doing that. Most people do. Most beings do. And that's when you'll start to really get some of that feeling to come back in of, oh yeah, I'm starting to feel the past loved one again. I'm starting to feel them near me. And that is the first step in us continuing our soul journey. After we have left the spiritual spa day, put some pieces back together of ourselves and what we're doing, that's the next step. Now, we might bring in more soul energy from our higher self at this point to do more soul journey things. We might wait until everyone that we love has passed, give everybody hugs, and then continue on our soul journey space. It might be becoming a guide for someone who's still down here on planet. That is a part of your soul journey. You're like, hey, I turning around, I know my next step is to be their guide, and being their guide until they pass and they go to their spiritual spa day. There's a whole lot of variation. There's as many opportunities as there are souls. Like, there's so many different directions that we might be taking based exactly on what we're doing on a personal level. So there's not a lot of rules here as far as what I can give you in regards to what the next part of the soul journey is, because now you're on the next stage. You're in the next space of the soul journey, and that goes outside of what happens when we die. That goes to what are soul journeys and what do they consist of, which can be a whole other video if you guys want. Just let me know. I got a lot there. How you doing, Hermes? Good so far? Solid. So, moving Hermes to the side. Apollo is going to be so annoyed that I'm featuring the hamster when he still does not have a stuffy or anything like that. Maybe I just need to surround the desk with stuffies to the gods. Hashtag stuffies is God. Hashtag stuffies to the gods. That would be so funny. Anyway, beside the point, I get distracted. ADHD. Here we go. So the number one question I get once I've explained, don't fall over. Thank you. After I've explained all of this, a lot of times people ask, but what about ghosts? How are ghosts a thing then? And I can go more in depth on this, but I'm going to just kind of touch on it. Ghosts are part of what happens sometimes when we pass, a fracturing occurs. Now, fracturing is the best word that I have for what happens when we pass, but that does not mean that it's a violent breaking apart type of process that the connotation of the word fracturing might give us. That's just not the case. Fracturing is more like peeling apart. It's more like different flower petals from the same rose go to different locations. It's not like a violent ripping. It's just like, oh, this petal floats over here and this one floats up there and this one goes on to that way. There's a bunch of different things that can happen. Ghosts are oftentimes a part of that soul fracturing process, that soul depedaling, if you will. What will happen is if there's something that is unresolved on planet, the soul is like, hey, we need to resolve this. A petal will break off and we'll sit there and do ghost stuff to resolve that thing instead of a full other incarnation. Maybe it's just part of the journey. A lot of times, a lot of ghosts that I've met, especially the ones that are the most conscious, being a ghost was part of the soul journey that they decided to embark on when they incarnated in the first place, even if it was in the 1700s or whatever. They incarnated in the first place. They had the plan that after they passed, a lot of their soul energy was actually going to stay around in ghost form to do more of their soul journey here on planet, which is totally fine. That is another thing that can happen. Sometimes really small petal just breaks off and kind of gives an imprint, and that's just a way of holding energy space that maybe we will gather again further on in a later incarnation. Maybe we're waiting for someone to release that. Maybe it just kind of accidentally got stuck, which can happen. It's not often that it happens, and usually the accidental got stuck is a very, very small piece of your soul energy. It's not like your whole soul is going to accidentally get stuck here. That's a big fear people will have sometimes. It's not the case, but a little piece sometimes accidentally gets stuck, especially if you had a very traumatic passing, or if someone you loved also passed with you and you didn't know that at the time. Sometimes your soul energy will stay behind to try to see if you can make sure they're okay. Then they turn out okay, and eventually that little piece or that little memory will rejoin with the rest of the soul energy that is passed on. So that's part of the fracturing, but other fracturings can happen too. So ghosts come from fracturings, or those depedaling moments where we kind of divide up our energy a little bit. Our energy is already being being divided with our body, going back to the earth stuff. We're talking now like soul energy pieces specifically, and the soul energy can hang around. Oftentimes, though, I will say being in ghost form, and we can do a much deeper dive on ghosts if we want to do that. But being in ghost form, we do not retain the same amount of memory that we would if we had more soul energy around, which is why sometimes ghosts need reminders or need to be pulled up to rejoin their soul energy, or we need to do psychopomp work, something in that space. Other types of fracturings that do and can exist are fracturings where when our soul leaves our body, we go into the spiritual spa day. Oftentimes, if we didn't do certain things on earth, specifically a lot of shadow work, if you're a very avoidant person, never dealt with any of your stuff, just hit it, though you may go to a spiritual spa day, you may still have this inclination to peel off kind of part of that shadow work as well and send that to a different place. That's where we get shades. Shades are essentially parts of people's souls that they never dealt with and didn't want to deal with, so they just kind of shoved away. They tend to end up in a couple of the different eternal realms, one of which is the underworld. It is not scary and evil, I promise, but a shade is another thing, which is all of the unhealed stuff, and usually you need help via a deity, via the other higher self workings of the universe, that sort of thing, to identify a shade, heal that shade, and then send that shade back to more of their whole soul selves. But that can also happen too, that fracturing, which is also another reason I encourage people to do shadow work. Not only will it make your life here better, it'll make the afterlife better too. No shade work, which is really fun. We don't want shade work. No one wants shade work, I promise. You'd rather deal with it here. But that can also happen. That's another kind of fracturing there. Sometimes your soul kind of depetals because one part of it is going to immediately reincarnate again, especially if you're doing a very large incarnation cycle. These aren't super common, but they do happen. They used to be a lot more common in the past than they are now. I channeled on this quite extensively. Basically, if you have like one piece of your soul that is like, we're doing another incarnation, some will pedal off and you'll go to your spiritual spa day, and some will pedal off and immediately incarnate again to do another life. And then do that again and again and again, depending upon how many incarnations you immediately had already planned out and agreed for yourself to do. Again, don't stress about this. This is not particularly common. This is really more of a thing if you are a type of soul that is very invested in Earth, or if you're in a cycle where you're doing a lot of very thin soul lives, like boom, 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 one right after another, instead of learning or experiencing things in one longer, more intense soul life that is probably more intense in general. You decided to do a bunch of like thinner lives that aren't as intense, that are a lot shorter, not as full, to learn the things you need to do or experience things you need to do over multiple incarnations. That's the way that sometimes happens as well. So not saying that your loved one would immediately incarnate with their full soul self again and not remember you and not be there to greet you, but more of like a piece stays and then a piece petals to incarnate again. Sometimes bringing in additional soul energy from the higher self to do that as well. So there's still memory there. It's all very complicated, and I'm trying to give you basic things. Hopefully that all makes sense. Additionally, after the spa day, sometimes souls pedal so that some can move on and continue the going up the universe cake, continue rejoining with higher self, continue doing other, incarnations maybe in a different realm, or doing other soul work in different places, etc., while the part of the soul that didn't pedal off stays and waits for the rest of the family energy to come from the planet up to them as well, or is a guide for someone, etc. So we do have a lot of ability to kind of fracture and split our souls out that can do a whole bunch of different stuff. There's a whole bunch more reasons we might do this, but those are some of the general basic ones. What if you believe a very specific thing about the afterlife or about death? Does that have any bearing on your soul journey from the time of your passing? Yes, it does, but also no. Or let's say you are a devout Christian and you deeply believe in the white heteronormative version of what heaven will be. Oftentimes you will be greeted with that, but the second you go through the pearly gates, you'll get an immediate download of all this information and remember how the universe works, and that kind of goes to the wayside. Same thing, if you are a very pagan person and you're like, cool, I am going to the Elysian Fields, which is a concept in Greek mythology, then you might go there, and then they do the same thing where they open you up again. So you do kind of get greeted with what you expect a little bit, but then it gets expanded upon almost immediately, and that expectation gets removed. It's actually really helpful that they do this, especially for people who are very afraid of death. A lot a lot of elderly people right now are clinging because they're very afraid. They're clinging and clinging because they have been told their morality dictates their afterlife in such a significant way. And that's causing so much fear, especially around the elderly who only were given the beliefs that were handed down to them and had a very hard time ever expanding outside of that. It's creating a lot of fear and a lot of people holding onto the body for too long. A lot of things like that are happening right now. And so in doing this, it kind of like eases them back into the afterlife. I say back because we've been there before. This is just us returning. So it kind of eases all of that in. It does happen. Doesn't matter what religion someone, subscribes to, that can kind of lend them into that space. We do kind of that. Now, there's some more caveats to that, which I'll touch on a little bit later. But yeah, your beliefs do matter. The only thing I will say is if your belief is that you cease to exist, if it just you poof out of reality. I've actually asked about this, and it's been harder for people to explain this to me on that side. That is just pretty much immediately unworked. You kind of 3D outsider perspective supervise what that would actually look like to see how that is an impossibility, and then continue with your spiritual spa day, etc. So that's a no on that one, but there's kind of some deeper gunk in there as well. Now, I've said this already, but incarnation in this human realm is a part of a larger soul journey that we are on and that we are doing. So when we are talking about death and passing, we're actually just talking about one of our deaths and passings of all these different incarnations that we're having simultaneously on this kind of plane or layer of the cake of the universe, which is really like spirituality 501. I'm not going to like just jump you up there from this kind of 101 type of concept, but know that just because you incarnated, that's not the entire soul journey you're on. You were born and then you died. That is not a complete soul journey. That is part of a larger soul journey you're having. That can be for a whole ton of reasons that you're doing this. It is not just learning. Learning is a byproduct. Learning always happens in some way, but it's not just learning. There's could be a million different reasons you chose to incarnate. So I always want to encourage people to think beyond this, experience and do this lifetime to your absolute fullest. We're supposed to be uncomfortable here. That's the point of this layer of the universe cake, is to figure out how to exist through discomfort, to thrive through discomfort, to connect through discomfort. That's important. So embrace this layer of the universe cake the best that you possibly can, knowing there's a whole lot more you're going to be doing on this soul journey you're on. And this is just one tiny, tiny piece of that. The other thing I want to kind of touch is like an outlier thing. You don't immediately go back and rejoin your higher self. I've had a lot of people ask me this before. It's like, well, when I pass and I rejoin my higher self, and I'm like, that's gonna be a little while. Like, you got stuff you're doing in the meantime. Like, there's a whole lot more going on. Yes, you do have a higher self and a highest self and a mid self, all these different like parts of you that are out there, but you're not like immediately passing and then just like hopping up 5 layers of the universe cake to go rejoin your higher self. One, that would be incredibly jarring. Two, it would be kind of pointless because you really didn't experience everything fully and then get the experience of being a little piece of soul version of you. And you didn't get the experience of learning stuff you needed to on the layer above us in this universe cake before you go to that one. Like, it's a lot longer of a journey and more in depth of a journey, so you don't just immediately like hop back to higher self. That being said, when you do pass, you do immediately get a lot of information about how the universe works. You do pretty immediately get like all of the like amnesia taken off of you. Not all of it, but a lot of the amnesia gets removed that we agreed to when we came down to this layer of the universe cake. A lot of that gets dissipated from your space. So it's not like you're blind some more, but you do get to come in and actually have, experiences in different ways before you're just rejoining the higher self. I raised him up. I don't know. This is going to be like continuity issues with just this hamster like dancing around through this entire video, but I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Hang out, Hermes. Okay. The other thing I want to talk about very briefly is both the death guides and also what happens when the two consciousnesses that are part of you kind of die at different times. So death guides are essentially the beings that greet you as you pass. You've heard these stories, I'm sure everyone's heard these stories of like, oh, my mom who had already passed away was there to grab me and help me go from, living to past. But I said no and I came back, right? When people who've seen like had a near-death experience, people will say that, like they see beings a lot of the time. They do. Those are your death guides. Sometimes it's one of your spirit guides, which I've done a ton of videos about this on all of the platforms about how spirit guides and past loved ones aren't necessarily the same thing, because they're not necessarily the same thing. However, it could be a spirit guides that you're really familiar with, or a spirit guide that was selected by you beforehand to be the being that guides you from living to past to the next layer of the universe cake. Excuse me. Or it can be past loved ones. It can be your family that's on the other side, or your animals that are on the other side waiting to guide you through. That absolutely can happen. The big thing is, and I want everyone to understand this, nobody dies alone. Nobody dies alone. Everyone has some type of being on the other side helping them. Everybody does. That's actually like a really big rule. No one is born alone either, which is a little bit of a larger concept. Birth is actually a requirement to exist on this layer of the universe cake. Did you know that? I'll do another video on deities. I have a previous one, but even deities had to be born to walk down here in their like higher self forms, which I thought was fascinating when I figured that out. So like birth is a requirement, but no one's born alone either. Not only because, your mom, but also because like guides help you with birth as well. You do have birth guides that are there, like helping your soul enter into your new body and guiding you through there. Same thing as end of life. Nobody dies alone. I promise you that. I have asked so many times because of personal experiences, etc., that I've had to go through, and kind of that was a big thing I struggled with for a long time. And it took a lot of convincing of me by spirit to show me that that is just genuinely not the case. Everyone has guides helping them pass to the next layer of universe. That's how transformation works in general. Now with that, sometimes our two different souls that exist within us pass at different times. Oftentimes, this is where we get a lot of like Alzheimer's and dementia. The soul self has passed on to the other side and is hanging around outside of the body, and the bodiness consciousness is still hanging on. There is a million different reasons for this, but on a spiritual level, that happens quite a bit with especially those types of degenerative mind illnesses. The soul goes first, the body hangs on for a lot longer, and the body only holds a few old memories and the ability to kind of eat, and that's very much it. Oftentimes, this is because of fear. Our human body is here to protect us. Predominantly, that's its role, to keep us alive for as long as possible. That's what our body's doing. Our body doesn't always do fantastic at that, and it does a lot of mistranslating information that we give it. It takes things very, very literally. However, in that literally-ness, sometimes the soul's like, I'm done, we're leaving, we're good to go. And the body's like, I have to keep hanging on and protecting us for longer. This especially comes up with people who have a lot of religious trauma or fear of redemption or morality issues, things like that, stopping them from wanting to move on to the afterlife. Sometimes it's just because they're stubborn. So it's not everyone has like these fear issues. Sometimes they're just really stubborn or like, not yet. And the body hangs on for that. So that can happen. Eventually, of course, the body does pass to, the consciousness goes, and all the consciousness return to the places that they're meant to be in, which is, of course, a good thing. That is at that point what we're going for. Most of the time we want to hold on for as long as possible, but when it's in that type of situation, everything goes in divine timing. There's nothing you can do to like force that to happen or anything in that way. It's just letting the divine timing play out in the way that it needs to, but that does on occasion happen. This is the part of the video where I tell you something that is going to make you very uncomfortable. And I'm prefacing this on purpose because it's going to make a lot of people very uncomfortable because it's not how we like to think. The universe has told me so many different times. My guides have told me this, different deities have told me this, etc. But we need to remember that the universe does not operate off of our sense of morality. So where people go in the afterlife, unfortunately, is not dictated by their moral stance here. Now, they can be on a huge pain journey that they're going through. They can have a really hard time in their spiritual spa day. They can be in this space where they're going through what it is to be truly evil in a space. Like, there's tons of things that can happen. And I wish I could tell you bad people get their comeuppance. But the truth of it is us deciding what is a good person and bad person is not the universe deciding what is a good person and a bad person. All we can do is live to our best and know that we are going to do awesome things after we pass too, that do the best here because it's the right thing to do, and do our best to be as kind and loving as we can because it's the right thing to do, not because of some vague threat of what's going to happen to you in the afterlife. It's always better to do your best and be your kindest and be your most loving and honor people and cause no harm. It's always better for that for a million different reasons. But I hope that you do that not just because you want to get to the shiny gates, but because that's who you want to be as a person and as a soul. And on this soul journey, that's the type of energy you want to give. It matters. It helps you. It helps others. And really, that's why a lot of us came right now, is to reestablish the human concept of community and connection. And so I don't want anyone to ignore that because there's no spooky demons ready to eat your heart out if you do some bad choices or wear spaghetti straps. Like, that's not how that works. And that, I know, can be really, really hard to understand. And I acknowledge that. Sit with that in whatever way you need to. But it is also how the universe works, unfortunately. However, if you take anything from this video, I really hope it's the fact that death is not scary. I have talked to so many people who have passed on, who are not around in physical form anymore, and they said the scariest part of death was how they were feeling before they died, not the actual process of it. How afraid they were before it actually happens, and as soon as they've passed, it's not as scary anymore. So don't think that any of your loved ones, etc., in any way were terrified, or that death is a terrifying process. However, they have said, and so many guides, so many deities, so many people from the other side have told me, please live this to your fullest ability. It is not an out. It is not a quit button to go to death early. We have to trust in our divine timing. So remember, you are here for a reason. There are things you're doing in this incarnation, and you are going to be okay. We've got this, and we can navigate through this life together, and we do have spiritual stuff helping us. So next time, what we're going to talk about is some afterlife stuff, because I can already hear, but do heaven and hell exist, coming from the comment section. They do, as do the underworld, as do cosmic realms of other places. I mean, there's a million different things there. So in a different video, we will talk about the afterlife and what that journey is. And until that time, please remember, you are magical as fuck. Hit that little subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next video. Mwah! Bye!